Today's guest is Sara Nay, CEO of Duct Tape Marketing and a powerhouse when it comes to helping small businesses and content creators scale strategically. She went from intern to CEO, built a thriving fractional CMO agency, and now trains others to do the same. If you've ever thought about turning your expertise into a high-ticket service without working 80-hour weeks, this episode is for you. Sara, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. You started as an intern at Duct Tape Marketing and became CEO, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. What was the mindset? Like, how do I explain that? What was the biggest mindset shift you had to make along the way?
I mean, honestly, there's been a lot. That transition was over about a 14-year period. And so I started at Duct Tape Marketing as an intern, honestly, not knowing a ton about business or marketing at that point. And so a lot of the mindset shifts early on was building confidence early on in the journey. And then now that I've shifted over the years from intern to different roles in the business, so I've been account manager, I've been our CEO for a while, or our COO for a while, and recently shifted into the CEO seat. And so a lot of the mindset stuff that I've gone through more recently in growth is things like delegation is key. And so it can be easy as you're in a small business to hold on to more than you should probably. And so I've really leaned into delegation as a priority for myself over the last few years. And that's been really good for growth. And then another mindset thing is marketing, content, everything is evolving so quickly right now. And so I've always had the growth mindset, but I've had to lean into the growth mindset with the idea that we need to continuously be learning right now and evolving our skills and staying up with how fast things are changing in the marketing world. And so those are just some more recent mindset things that have really helped me.
Yeah. I like the idea that you moved from just an intern who was learning and juggling things, and now you've learned to how to delegate and how to build teams. Right?
Yeah, there's a lot to learn in all the different positions. And I think what I was learning early on is very different than what I'm learning today. But I think that's one of the most important things in business is that you're always learning something, whether it's personal growth stuff or it's business evolution stuff or it's marketing or whatever industry you're in. Like that, I think to stay relevant today, you have to, I've been in the marketing space for 14 years and I always say that I still learn something new every single day. And I think that's the way we continue to succeed and to compete.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot, especially when you move from one role to another, there's a kind of knowledge depth that you have to get a kind of pay off in order to perform in that role effectively.
Absolutely. But I think the fact that I've played in so many different roles in the company, it's making me a better CEO. And because I've been in the intern spot, I've been in the account manager spot, I've been in the operations spot. And so I understand what my team members are going through in those roles. And so it ultimately makes me, I think, a better manager and leader because I've walked in all the different kind of shoes within the organization.
Yeah. A lot of creators struggle with the expert versus imposter syndrome, right? How did you gain the confidence to set strategy at the high level?
Yeah, that's definitely something that I also think kind of evolves with the time and experience. But a couple of things that I had, working for me in that is, even though I didn't personally have a lot of marketing experience, I joined a company that did have a lot of marketing experience and a proven system. And so I was able to join a company that had something proven, which then ultimately gave me a lot more confidence in behind that. But the whole imposter piece, I run into that all the time because I actually certify and train marketing consultants, agencies, fractional CMOs in our approach. That's one of our core offers. And a lot of people, when they're just getting started, you can see they struggle with this imposter syndrome. And it is hard. But I think if you can really understand deeply the value that you're providing for clients and you see the results that you're able to get them, and you also do research and you see what other competitors are offering and you come up with a plan of how you can set yourself apart, I think the confidence piece comes with reps and time and experience. I also, going back to the mindset thing as well, one of the things you have to keep in mind as you're getting started, as you're growing is, when you're in the sales role, it can be discouraging if you get a lot of no's along the way. So people not moving forward with your products or services, but you really have to keep telling yourself, a no is getting you closer to the next yes, as long as you're learning from all of those experiences.
Yes. Yeah, that's the truth. I like the fact that the funny thing is that the whole imposter syndrome, it's a cycle. So people say, oh, I'm not good enough, so I'm not going to do this thing. And because you don't get to do the thing, you don't get to build the reps and you don't get to become good. So I think the whole idea is you get started, and along the way you definitely learn a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to be terrified of public speaking, like absolutely terrified to stand up and say my name in front of people. But over the years, I've just done more and more of it. And I think you just have to go in with the mindset of it's going to maybe feel a little awkward or hard at first, but as long as you keep doing it, whether it's, selling to client prospects or leading client engagements or conducting strategy or whatever it is, as long as you keep doing it and put the work in, it does always get easier over time. And so that's also, I think, something that's really important. Like if something feels really hard or awkward in the beginning, as long as you put the practice in and you put the work in, ultimately it will feel a lot more fluid with the more reps you get.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you talked about on your Podmatch profile the FCMO, the fractional content marketing. What's the O?
Fractional Chief Marketing Officer is what we train on. And so the whole fractional term has gained more popularity in the last several years. We've been essentially teaching the concept, I would say, for 15 or 16 years now. But really the idea of fractional is a business is able to essentially bring in someone to act as a part-time, in a way, fraction of your time, member of their team ultimately. Teach people how to be chief fractional marketing officers. And essentially through that, they come into a business, they get started by creating an overall strategy, and then they move into a long-term relationship with the businesses that they're serving, where they're essentially owning the strategy, they're owning the marketing budget, they're owning the marketing metrics, and they're leading the marketing team. And so it's really, think of it just in a simpler way to put it, it's essentially an outsourced marketing leader that stays involved in the business long term. And so a piece of that is big piece of that is content, because all of marketing is essentially driven by content. And so that chief marketing officer, fractional chief marketing officer, might be leading the content team and creating the content strategy, but they're not necessarily always the ones writing content, if that makes sense.
From this explanation you just made, I have a lot of questions I need to ask. The first one is,
of course,
if we were to separate fractional from the CMO, right, what exactly does the fractional mean in this context?
So a fractional, for any type of fractional role. So we're talking about fractional chief marketing officers, but there's also fractional CEOs, there's fractional COOs, there's fractional CROs, there's all different kinds of fractionals. And essentially what that means is you're bringing someone in to be essentially an extension of your leadership team on a part-time basis. And so, typically if you think about a CMO, a chief marketing officer, a company would need to hire a chief marketing officer full-time. The fractional approach allows you to get that level of experience, but bring someone in part-time for a fraction of the cost ultimately, because you're not paying a full-time salary.
So you're not paying a full-time salary, but then you also get to reap the benefits of a chief marketing.
Yes, absolutely. So you're getting someone with seasoned experience, that's a strategist, that's a leader, that's a high-level thinker, that you're able to just get a portion of their time. And so ultimately, pay a portion of what you would pay for a full-time member. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. When I was doing the research for this FCMO, right, and I looked at your profile, I was like, exciting, interesting. I saw that other things you mentioned that we could possibly talk about on the podcast, but I was like, no, this one is exactly unique. This is peculiar to her. So I was like, this FCMO, how do I explain this now? What kind of name would I call it? First of all, it's not coaching, it's not consulting, right? Now, because the example we're making now is we're using this FCMO, but from your definition, it could be an FCO, so you didn't say CEO, FCRO. I forgot the names you called, but other sections of persons in the company. Like what would we call that kind of service or offering, right? There's coaching, there's consult, there is what other service again? I don't know, but I don't know if you understand the question, or should I rephrase it?
No, I understand what you're saying. It's really its own category. And so, as you said, there's consulting. A lot of people think of like bringing in an outside expert is bringing in a consultant, and they're basically coming in and maybe working on a project and giving feedback and advising, and then ultimately usually kind of leaving. Like they're bringing in for like a short-term engagement, a lot of cases with a consultant. Coaches are coming into an organization and they're just coaching. So they're not really handling any of the execution. So maybe they're more like a mentor, if you will. There's also marketing agencies, which are within our category as well. So marketing agencies are typically heavy on like the execution side of things and not really as heavy on the strategy side of things, except good agencies. And then so fractional CMO is another basically option. So consultant, coach, agency, or fractional CMO. And the fractional CMO, how it's different is you really become part of the company. You're a partner with the company that you work with, and you're typically there for a long-term engagement. At Duct Tape Marketing, what we call ourselves is a bit of a combination of some of these. We're a fractional CMO agency. And so if a small business was going to come work with us, we would start with strategy led by the fractional CMO. And then when we transition to a long-term retainer engagement with our clients, the fractional CMO stays involved. So you're still getting that leadership, but we also have a full marketing agency as well. So we have executors. So we have people that can write content and focus on SEO and manage paid. But the nice thing is they're all led and directed by the fractional. So in a sense, you're really getting an outsourced marketing department led by, again, a strategist and a leader.
Yeah. Question I want to ask you, you keep talking about short-term, long-term. How long is long-term in this case?
I mean, our longest client's about 16 years at Duct Tape Marketing. But typically, the longer we're with our clients, the more impact we can make because we'll deeply understand their business, their clients, their revenue streams, all of the things. So whenever we're starting with new clients, it's an initial 30 to 45 day engagement to work on that strategy piece. And then we typically go to a long-term retainer from there, usually with our clients for at least a few years. At that point, then we might help them hire some more in-house staff to replace some of the work that we've been doing. But the long-term relationship, the goal is to work with our clients for a long time, help them increase their revenue and really become an extension of their business.
Yeah. So far from fractional CMO, the name I would love to call what you guys do, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is you guys offer strategy as a service.
Yes, we actually are starting to talk about it as marketing leadership as a service. Strategy is a core component, but we're also leading the team. We're owning the metrics. We're running the budget for the business. And so we're talking about it as marketing leadership as a service, and strategy is a key component of that.
Yeah, I see why you lean towards marketing as a service, because in this case, we're talking about fractional CMO. The scenario could change where we could be talking about fractional something else, right? And in that situation, it will still be strategy and service. But then, and let's say there's one example you gave that that could also be fractional. Can you give me an example
of different fractional roles that are out there?
Other than CMO.
Yeah, so another fairly common one is a fractional CFO, Chief Financial Officer, or another common one is a COO, so Chief Operations Officer. And so we only play really in the marketing space, but if you're bringing in let's say a chief operating officer, a COO, it would typically be a very similar model where they would come in, audit, understand your business, probably create an operations strategy of some sort, and then you typically would retain them for part of their time moving forward.
Yeah, you talked about, I asked you how long is long, and you said you gave the answer you gave was the longer. The longer you work with the clients, the better for you guys to like execute the strategy and get better results for the client. And you gave an example of your longest client being working with you guys for 16 years. What I want to know is, other than the long term, right? Other than long term of 5-10 years, are there other like packages, other ways a fractional CMO could work?
Yeah. So yes, absolutely. That's the thing with the fractional model. There's really no set way of doing things. There's no wrong, I would say, and right way of doing things. Typically, our goal is to work long-term with clients, to become a partner of theirs, to run their execution and their strategy. Like that's where we believe we can provide the most value in the small business space. But there's other fractional CMOs out there that maybe they just come in and create strategy and then they part ways, or maybe they come in and direct a project or fix the marketing operations and they part ways. And so there's no one way of doing fractional work. I always tell people when they're getting started in the fractional space, it really comes down to what are your goals as a business in terms of reoccurring revenue and team structure? And then what do your clients need the most? And then create packages and service offerings that support both of those things.
Yeah. The questions, I have a lot of creator questions to ask. And the first one is, how can how can someone what's like how can someone scope and structure a strategy engagement without over delivering or undercharging?
Yeah. So how can they scope it with what was the second part of your question?
Scope and structure a strategy engagement without over delivering or undercharging.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to your question on imposter syndrome. I think when people start when they start in the fractional CMO space or just offering strategy services in general, they undervalue strategy often. That's a common struggle. And then it seems really hard and people get burned out. So I really do think it comes down to understanding the value in what you're offering. For us, we typically, like I said, start with a 30 to 45 day engagement where we have a very specific set of deliverables. And we have very specific price points for those deliverables. And so typically in strategy, we're doing a marketing and brand audit. We are doing competitive research. We're interviewing some of their clients. We're developing personas and messaging. We're mapping out a customer journey. We're mapping out a content strategy. We're identifying growth priorities for the next quarter, and we're putting all of that into an execution calendar. But that's how we've systemized marketing. We have a step-by-step process on how to do each of those things and what the deliverables should look like, which then allows us to price that consistently moving forward. And then it also helps us uncover how to map out our retainer packages moving forward, because the strategy essentially tells us what we're going to do from an execution standpoint with the client. And so it allows us to price the long-term retainer and still hopefully hit our profitability goals.
Yeah. So if I understand you correctly, the strategy section is like a diagnosis of the business to know what ailments or they going through, so you know the kind of if it will be an operation, if it will be something that you just take a couple of drugs and you'll be good.
Yeah, diagnosis is the first step. But then we are conducting more research, creating personas, creating messages, creating a content strategy. So, and creating an execution calendar and whatnot. So I always tell people strategy to us is really research on the front end and then the plan on top of that, because you need to have both components. You need to do the research to create the plan effectively.
Yeah. The next question I'll be asking right now is a playback of the question I asked earlier, which is apart from when I said apart from the long term um, working with clients, what if you guys do project based? Now I'm phrasing the question differently this time, and so for me it's what's like the easiest kind of like entry point packages, right? For a strategy work. Yeah.
So typically for us, I mean, we work with clients in a very similar way. Like, we've been in business for 30 years. We've always worked in the small business space. And through that, our core offering has always been strategy first as the starter, like the beginning offer. And that's that 30 to 45 day engagement. And then we've always transitioned to long-term retainers. So we honestly don't have a ton of other options. Like, that's typically how we work with clients. We do have a marketing and brand audit, which is more of the kind of auditing on the front end, which is the first step of strategy first. We will offer that as a kind of a front end offer before strategy first if someone really wants that stepping stone to learn what it was like to work with us a bit more. But we don't have a ton of offers in the small business space for our consulting, because it really is what we've been doing for a long time. And so it's strategy into retainer, and that's kind of the core ways that people work with us.
Okay, so there's something I want to get. The strategy, is it like different from the retainer, or is connected? Like once people decide to work with you, they do the strategy and then do the retainer, or is it that someone can just do the strategy and then it's one-off stuff? They don't have to do the retainer.
Yeah, most people hire us to work with us long term. We start with the strategy, so it's just an initial 30 to 45 day engagement. I think the nice thing about that is that allows them to experience working with us, but it also allows us to experience working with them. So together, at the end of that 30 to 45 days, they'll have a complete marketing and plan in place where they either have the option to take it and run with it if they want to with their team, or keep us involved to actually handle and oversee the execution. So it is just an initial 30 to 45 day commitment. And then when we go into our retainers with our clients, even though our goal is to work with them for years, we are just month to month contracts ultimately.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've noticed over the course of our conversation over the past 20 minutes is that the offers the Duct Tape Marketing has is, how do I put it now? It's very, like, it's, I should say, I would want to say one, but I'm not exactly sure. But I think It's a very simple and direct offer. It's not like you guys have a ton of offers. You guys have one clear crystal offer and for basically small business. Am I right?
Yeah, yep, exactly. So everyone starts, with the strategy piece, but then what we do for execution is more customized and dependent on the business. And so when we actually get past strategy and we move into marketing execution, that's when, again, we're leading the engagement, but we also are implementing things like CRM management and social and paid campaigns and content production and video production and review management. And so that's where our offers get more complex, I would say, but it's always in the form of strategy first, and then we'll move into a retainer. We'll have mapped out what we're going to do, and we're going to essentially execute your marketing from there.
Yeah, for the listeners, right? One of the peculiar things I noticed about this, what she has talked about strategy as a service, is the fact that in this example we talk about CMO, but it could be basically for anything. For me, what I'm thinking is, let me ask this question quickly, as it just came up to my head, and I have to ask it: is could someone have like I don't know, but let me just ask: could someone have a fractional podcast producer? I don't know how that will work.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they basically would come in and probably create the podcast strategy. So again, leading with strategy. And then they would manage the production moving forward. And so same thing, like I know you work with or you speak to a lot of content creators. You could even be, a fractional content marketing officer, where you're really just focused on the content piece. Where you're, again, hopefully you would come into a business, you would create the content strategy based on, marketing and business goals. And then you would basically oversee, manage, get the content done. And I've been talking about this a lot lately. I think with the evolution of different AI tools, a lot of the marketing execution is potentially being replaced by different AI tools. And so I think all marketers, regardless of what they're focusing on, if it's content, if it's social, if it's website, if it's, whatever it is, I think all marketers need to continue to elevate and focus on management and leadership and strategy, because these AI tools are essentially replacing some of the work that we were previously doing. And so if you primarily focus on content, I'm not necessarily suggesting that your job's going to be replaced tomorrow, but people using the different AI tools are going to continue to get harder to compete with if you aren't diving in. And so I think of, to content specifically, like I think if you are a copywriter by trade, like now you're able to use different content tools to essentially think of them as like your interns or people that are assisting you in content production. And that ultimately should be elevating your role into the overall strategy and focusing on the customer journey and focusing on the metrics and the reason behind the content, but then to be able to tap into the different tools that are now available to you to be able to get content production done faster. And so I think that's where people are going to struggle in the future, is if they just keep selling content services or SEO services or whatever it might be, it's going to be a race to the bottom on pricing. And so really the opportunity here is to elevate and lead in your craft and not just continue to stay in the execution bucket.
Yeah, I think ultimately the whole idea of hiring a fractional CMO or fractional, I'm trying to look for a word to put instead of CMO, but for if you've been listening so far, you know that fractional CMO, it also applies to fractional whatever the case might be for the business or the scenario. But in this context, we're talking about fractional CMO because the person I'm interviewing is a fractional CMO. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, yeah, for a fractional CMO, one of the things that interest me about it is the fact that I don't know what the revenue for your company might be, but I'm guessing, right? And you could just say yes or no, but I won't, yeah. I'm guessing that you guys don't necessarily get to work with like a ton of, it's not your business, not the kind of business that works with, that works with the crowd. It's more like, a couple of clients, but because they work with you for a long term. Am I right?
Yeah. So we really, we have two core sides of our business. As I said, we certify marketing consultants, coaches, agencies in our approach, and that's the primary side of our business. But we also do work directly with small business clients. And typically we try to keep about 10 to 15 clients on retainer as that side of our business. And so as part of that, we have 3 fractional CMOs on our team that serve those clients. And then we have 3 account managers on our team that work directly supporting the fractional CMOs. And then we have execution under that. And so, yeah, as a fractional CMO or a fractional in general, regardless of what kind of fractional you're working with, you're not working with personally 10s, 20s, 30s on up of clients. You're usually probably working with, I would say, 7 to 8 clients max. Some only work with like 4 or 5. It just kind of depends on scope of work. So yeah, it's not necessarily that you're working with a huge number of people, because you really are getting deeply involved in their business.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good thing, because you don't have to be chasing clients every month and be looking for, okay, it's not a one-time thing that once you offer the service, you're like, okay, where is the next client going to come from? And I know most people listening will be saying, well, they're working with 10, 15 clients, but that doesn't sound like they're making a lot of money, a lot of money. And I think if that mentality has to be raised from the mind, basically, because sometimes one could have 5 or 6 clients. And I'm just giving an example, because I don't want to put you on the spot to start sharing revenue, but I'll just give a hypothetical example. And one could have a client that, let's say, 5 clients that pay 100 grand, right? I'm just giving an example. And you have just 5 clients, but one could also have 1,000 clients, and each of those clients, they pay let's say $100, or let's say $500. Yeah, one could have 1,000 clients that pay $500. Now, I don't know what the service might be, but managing 1,000 clients, that's a lot of work, like a ton of work. Compared to having 5 clients, it's way easier and, yeah, less stressful compared.
Yes, absolutely. I 100% agree. So it really just comes down to your specific goals, but it absolutely does come down to pricing effectively. And we do that, a lot of training on that for our fractional CMOs, consultants, and agencies that go through our program. Because exactly as you said, if you're charging the right price points, you can handle, a handful of clients and have the same revenue if you had a lot lower prices and a lot more clients. And I can say from experience, managing less clients
It's better.
often leads to long-term sustainability, ultimately, for me.
Yeah. Someone might be having this objection. Why wouldn't I just hire a full-time CMO instead of getting a fractional CMO?
It's a good question. I think for certain businesses, a CMO full-time absolutely makes sense, but it's a pretty big expense for small businesses. And so it really comes down to, do you really need a full-time person in place? And if the answer is yes, it's also, can you afford a full-time salary on top of that? And so I think if you really can, then absolutely go for a full-time CMO. But typically we found, like, a lot of the businesses that we work with as a fractional CMO, they're usually in like the 3 to 10 million revenue range. We do work with businesses up to 40 million or on if it's the right fit. But we found that people really in that spot, a full-time CMO is a hard salary to bring on. And so the fractional approach really makes it a lot more affordable for them to be able to bring in marketing leadership, but also marketing executors as well.
So what you're saying is it's cost effective.
Absolutely. Because you're typically, for a fractional CMO, you're just paying like a monthly retainer, versus for a CMO full-time, you would be paying salary and benefits and all the things that go along with bringing on a full-time employee. And these aren't entry-level marketers. These are seasoned marketers.
Yeah. We've talking about fractional CMO for a long time. And I feel the word has, kind of like stuck to my tongue. When we started the episode, pronouncing it itself was a bit difficult. But now I think I'm getting the hang of it. We've talked so much about fractional CMO, and yeah, that's what you do. Right now, you said you're the CEO. You've moved from the CMO to the CEO. The question I want to ask is, for a moment, at the core, you're a marketer. You've been doing market for a longer time than this compared to this CEO you've been doing. So I'm going to ask you some marketing questions. I mean, you train consultants, agencies, and coaches. So you're the best to answer this question.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. The question is, how do you balance delivering strategy versus execution, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything should start with strategy. I would say, on the front end. That's before you can even get started with any execution, is you have to have the plan, the research and the plan in place. And then typically when you're in a retainer with a client, strategy should be a part of the conversation and planning moving forward. And so typically in our long-term engagements, we're doing weekly calls with our clients just to touch base, keep things moving. But the strategy pieces are then on a monthly basis, we're reviewing the metrics with the client, we're discussing budget with the client. And then on a quarterly basis, we're basically doing a strategic plan for the next quarter. And so we're always planning out marketing strategy in 3-month chunks. And so it's not like you come in and you do strategy on the front end and then you're done. It's a part of the conversation on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis with clients moving forward as well. And so that really then drives what you're doing from an execution standpoint. And so how we kind of divide it up in our engagements is we have a fractional CMO involved, and that's their main focus is strategy, budget, metrics, overseeing orchestration of the marketing execution. And then we have an account manager in place under them. And that account manager then is really more focused on keeping the execution moving forward, hitting deadlines, finishing projects, communicating with clients. And so it's really two key people involved in engagements. It's a strategist and then someone that's really more in the weeds and in the execution.
I don't know if you create content.
We do. We create a lot of content.
No, like personally.
Yes, I do. Not as much as, so John Jantz is our founder at Duct Tape Marketing, and he's the person that obviously started the business 30 years ago, and he's really been a big face of the brand. He's written 7 books. He does a lot of speaking. He's been podcasting since 2005. So he's heavily led a lot of our content efforts. And then we have a director of marketing that does a lot of our content production as well. So I do some content, but that's not a huge focus of my role at this point. But we also, we are huge on establishing our clients as authority in their industries. And so we have really great processes in place to help our clients move from video to written content at scale. And so even if I'm not personally creating a ton of content today, I've trained a lot of people on creating content, and our business as a company has created a lot of content over the years as well.
The thing that is ironic is you keep saying that you don't create content, but we're on the podcast right now. Is this not content? And I know that
yes,
you
yeah.
can't say that. Oh, this is my content. But I know that you're someone who does podcast guesting, right?
Yeah, and that's definitely absolutely a form of content. It's a focus of mine, but not the only focus. Ultimately.
Yeah, but you have if I was to go online and search for your name and on podcast directories and all that, I would see a lot of episodes where you happen to be a guest in and happen to be an expert in those episodes, and that's content, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just wanted to put that out there so that it doesn't look like so like you just you get and understand some of the struggles that creators face. And I mean, apart from the fact that the company, you've worked as an intern, you worked as a marketing officer, so you basically worked almost in every phase of the company. You earlier talked about how it helps you to delegate, to understand the pains, to get like the perspective of your team members, right? And that has also allowed you to I think in a way it's beneficial in a way because it allows you to integrate into other businesses as a fractional CMO.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, it's helped me understand all different areas of our business personally. So operations and sales and finance and all the different departments, project management, all the things. And so when I'm coming in and acting as a fractional CMO to a client, I am able to have conversations about their sales team and about their operations and how they can scale effectively and how they can delegate and how they can manage, which if they're able to nail all of those things, it makes marketing a lot easier on us.
The question I want to ask is, what are some tools or systems you guys use to streamline client work? Just the marketing for one business. You shared the team member hierarchy structure earlier on, but I'd love to know some of the systems and tools, because I know that even though we said earlier on that you guys have 10 or 15 clients, each client itself look at the business of each client itself, it's more like it breaks down into different sections, and that's a lot compared to we multiply that by 10, by 15.
Yeah. So in terms of like the systems and tools we use with clients, I mean, we're really big on project management tools. So we use Monday.com, but there's a lot of great ones out there like ClickUp. I've heard good things, Teamwork. But we use Monday.com for all of our client management. So we basically build out a board for them. We put everything we're going to execute in there, and we manage client communication through that platform. And so we're big users there. And we also use a platform called Agency Analytics. That allows us to basically pull data from specific metrics for a client all into one platform. So we're able to pull in their Google Analytics and their CRM and their social and their paid efforts all into one place. And so those are really the two, I would say, key things that we use for client management. We obviously use a lot of other things within the client engagements, like for scheduling social posts and whatnot. But those are just some key ones that we use with every single client.
Yeah. What would you say? I know this question will sound cliche, but what would you say is like the number one productivity hack for running the strategy business?
AI right now. We've been doing this for a while. We've been creating strategy for businesses for quite some time now, but over the last 3 years, AI has made the research behind strategy a lot more effective, I would say, than we were when we were doing it by hand before. And so, for example, ChatGPT recently added a feature called deep research, and I think Claude has a similar one as well, but I'm a big GPT user, and so exactly. And so with deep research, you're able to put in the business that you're working with and their main competitors, and have it go out and create research and put together a full competitive report for you, and you can even tell it what to include exactly. And so, in the past, we were piecing competitive research together a lot more by using different tools or and we're still going to their websites, but it was a mix of manual work and jumping between tools. And now with ChatGPT and deep research, like you're able to still go to the websites and check out what they're doing online, but use deep research to put together a really valuable report as well. So in terms of productivity hacks, using AI to assist with the strategic research is honestly the best thing that we're doing right now.
Yeah. I mean, earlier on you talked about agency analytics. That's like a what would I call it now? A fantastic tool, because sometimes having to move from 15 different websites, from your Google Analytics to your Google Search Console to this, just to keep your hand on what is working and what is not working, like that itself is overwhelming. But if you have a place where you can just see everything, like, wow, those guys that thought of that tool, they're genius.
Yeah, it's really helpful for the small business clients too, because a lot of small businesses, like they have all the accounts set up, but it's overwhelming to log into all those different platforms. And so we're able to provide them with, here's all your analytics in one place that you really need to be looking at. And then we talk them through what it all means. It's incredibly valuable for the small business.
Yeah. We've been making some hints about AI, and I'd love for us to see how you use AI and all that. But I'm not going to ask the generic question, how do you use AI? The question I want to ask is, what parts of strategy work, right, can AI automate? Which you gave some example about deep research, right? And then if there's maybe something else you want to add to that deep research, I'd love for you to do that. And then I would also love for you to answer also what must stay human.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think of AI as a thought partner. You're still the thought leader, but you're using AI to help with your thinking process when it comes to strategy. And so for strategy, like we use AI to support with a lot of the research along the way. So competitive research was an example. Persona research is another example. So like ideal client research and ideal client profile development. AI can assist with messaging recommendations. It can assist with customer journey recommendations. I mean, it can really assist with a lot of the core components of strategy. But as you just mentioned, the human element, everyone has heard by now, garbage in, garbage out. And so with strategy research, you really we set up a custom GPT. When we get a new strategy client, we feed it with a ton of information on the front end. We use it as an assist to help with strategy, but it's not replacing us. So human is putting a ton of input on the front end, and then we're analyzing the output and then doing additional research, thinking, creativity with the output from there. And so I think that AI can help with automating tasks. It can help with research. It can help with productivity. but it's not great at understanding your client. It's not great with understanding how human relationships work fully. It doesn't have the big picture that you would have. And so there's a lot there's no emotional intelligence for the most part. And so there are limitations to AI. And so I always think of it as my thought partner in strategy. I'm going to give it a lot of good information. I'm going to analyze what it gives me. I'm going to tweak and evolve it and get it ready for the client from there.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the way people phrase the question. That's why it makes it look as if it's something confusing or something morally unethical or stuff like that. I mean, think of it this way. If someone was the head of content, they won't necessarily be writing content or creating content. What they'll basically be doing would be supervising the people who are creating content. And you will not say that the person is not doing anything, that person is just wasting time, like because they're not creating content. What are they doing? We need to fire them and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think that's something that, I've actually had some internal team members struggle with when they moved from executor to more of a manager. They've said to me even like, I don't feel like I'm doing work anymore. And I'm like, I argue back, you're doing work. You're just doing more important work at this point than you were before, because, execution is important, but like the management and the strategy piece, like if you don't have those, then execution will fail.
Yeah.
And so, if someone's coming in and they're providing that strategy and that leadership in their direction, like they are providing the value that actually makes that content work. And without that piece, the content will be noise and the content will probably fail. And so it's just a different kind of work, but it's ultimately, I think it's important work.
Yeah. So I'm going to run through a couple of rapid fire questions, and then and then we'll round up the episode. The question I want to ask is, the first question I asked you earlier on, so I'm not going to ask you again. It's about mindset shift. So I asked you at the start of the episode. The other one is, what's one thing you've delegated that has transformed your business, or maybe a client's business, or whatever example you want to give?
That's a good question. I really do think for me, it came down to what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses and where do I feel like I'm burning out. And so I really did kind of an analysis of my time. If you're listening and you haven't read the book Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell, it's all about delegation. And he has a really good system in place that talks about like what to delegate. But ultimately for me, when I'm really involved in long-term client work, I get on the edge of burnout. I really enjoy like the operations side of our business. I enjoy the leadership side of our business. I enjoy the training side of our business. But when I get really involved in client work, I get really sucked into that stuff, and the things that I need to do for our business takes a second seat essentially. And so for me personally, it was bringing in fractional CMOs and account managers to replace the client work that I was doing so I could actually sit in the CEO seat. But again, I think it looks different for everyone. It really just comes down to what lights you up. How can you make the most impact? How can you be in a role that allows you to sustain long term, and really analyzing that? And I think that should personally tell you what makes sense for you to delegate and not to delegate.
Fantastic. I love the fact that you give an example and then you extrapolated some of the points and thought process behind what you use for the examples. The next question is, what book, podcast, or resource would you recommend to someone aspiring to offer strategy as a service? Would be, in this example, say FCMOs, but something that will work for anyone regardless.
Yeah. Honestly, our podcast, I mentioned earlier, our founder's been podcasting since 2005, and I'm taking over some shows there as well. It's just called the Duct Tape Marketing Podcast, but over the years, we have always talked about strategy before tactics. And so honestly, if you're looking and learning more about that topic, we probably have the most volume of and quality of content on the strategy before tactics topic.
What's your non-negotiable habits for staying focused?
For staying focused?
Yeah.
For me, like I mentioned earlier, we use Monday.com. And so for me, I map out all of my tasks on my own personal board as to what I'm trying to accomplish every single day. And I put time blocks on my calendar that I'm able to actually focus on getting that work done. The tasks all come from quarterly strategic planning that we do. And so, I don't have any, I typically can stay fairly focused when I'm working. But for me, like if I don't have a plan in place, then I can't stay focused. So it's coming into each day, each week with a plan to knock out my priorities and not just check email all day.
Yeah.
And that allows me to stay the most focused.
If you could go back to your first year as CEO, what would you do differently?
When I first what?
If you could go back to your first year as CEO, what would you do differently?
Well, funny question because I'm in my first year as a CEO.
Oh,
So I stepped into the CEO seat in December. And so honestly, I've just been in the seat for a quarter now.
okay, we could
So
do
I
we could do
really
1 month. Let's do first 1 month.
yeah, no. So honestly, I've been learning a lot in this seat. I've been kind of acting as CEO, I would say, for a year. It just wasn't really official. So I can answer that question. In terms of differently, I think the hardest thing for me early on was not having someone to replace the work that I was doing in my previous role as the COO. Even still now today, I'm kind of straddling the CEO and COO seat. And so really, if I would start over and do things from the beginning again, when I just stepped into the CEO seat, it would have been finding someone to replace the work I was doing versus trying to do it all because I was absolutely spread too thin for a long time.
Yeah. I like your idea behind delegation. It's something that I would try. If a creator listening wants to start testing the fractional model, right, which is strategy as a service, what should be their first step?
It depends on like if you're going to be a fractional CMO or a fractional content marketing officer or whatever podcast producer, whatever you're going to go with. But it really, I think it comes down to understanding your target market deeply and understanding what their biggest needs are, and then creating packages around that lead with strategy. So, honestly, if you're considering this route and leading with strategy, for me, it would just be conducting research on your target market, understanding their biggest needs, understanding what competitors are offering, and then crafting a package that solves their challenges.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah. I like the what you call peculiar knowledge. Of course, I could get what I could have asked other questions, but this fractional CMO of a thing that you explained, I learned a lot, and I know that those listening, they also learned a lot too. Where can people
Great.
connect
Well, I
with
appreciate you.
And
Of course. Of course. So we have a page on our website with some free resources. It's just dtm.world/growth, or I'm very active on LinkedIn as well. So my name is just Sara Nay.
wow, are you the only Sara Nay, or is there other Sara Nays?
I think I might be the only one.
Wow.
I don't know for sure though.
Yeah.
Nope, there's some more. I just looked it up on my other tab. There's a couple on there, but Sara Nay, my title on there just says CEO at Duct Tape Marketing.
Okay. Because I've had guests who they tell me that they are the only whatever their name might be, and they just and I'm like, I wish I could claim that spot, but it's all right. Yeah.
I did get the URL that says Sara Nay in it, so that's good.
Well, okay, so every other Sara Nay is counterfeit. If the Sara Nay doesn't have the Sara Nay in the URL, forget about it.
They got to be Sara Nay +1.
Yeah, +1. It's a fake. It's obviously a bot. I'm just kidding though. Yeah. Thank you so much. I honestly had a great time chatting with you, and I'd love to have you back on the podcast in the future.
Yeah, I'd love it. I appreciate you and your time, and thanks for asking some good questions.
That's it for today's episode of Wisdom Journey. I hope it gave you something to think about or helped you feel a little less alone on your own path as a creator. If you'd like to support what I'm building, you can head over to buymeacoffee.com/wisdomhq and literally buy me a coffee. It keeps the show going and means a lot. Also, don't forget to join my newsletter. The link is in the show notes, where I share deeper reflection, tools I'm using, behind the scenes updates, and lessons I don't always get to cover on the podcast. It's free, and it's where the real conversations continue. Thanks for being here. I'm Wisdom Okonkwo, and I will catch you in the next one. Until then, keep building, keep learning, and keep showing up.